Hi everyone, it's Sim Minocha and Dema Tamanawala from CRELIBRARY. We are very excited today to have Marcus Gillam with us from Gillam Group. Marcus, I'm well aware of sort of some of your past experiences. Number one on Profit 500 for fastest growing company, working a lot with both public sector and private sector clients, and obviously you're a well-known family man. So for those of you who don't know you, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here meeting with you guys.
Yeah.
I always love talking about industry and what's happening. And so I'm Marcus Gillam. I'm the president of Gillam Group. This is a construction management company that I started just about 7.5 years ago, based in Toronto. And so Gillam Group was set up really just to focus on medium-sized projects in the ICI and residential sectors.
Yeah.
And so I felt, before starting the company, that there was a real opportunity for a really good construction company operating in that niche.
Right.
One that was relationship based, and that was a real driver in terms of the origination of Gillam Group. So I can give you a little bit of history. So I'm not sort of new to construction. I grew up in the industry. My father, back in the early 90s, bought into a company called Van Bots Construction, which you might remember.
Yeah.
When in those days, when he bought into Van Bots, the company had about 20 employees, and it was really just a local Markham-based construction company, although it had a 50-year history of operating in Toronto.
Right.
So when he joined, it was a tough time. It was in the 90s. There was not a lot of work to go around, as our industry was still reeling from the recession in those days.
Right.
And so, but he brought with him some relationships, a good track record, and he began to grow the business. And so, just focusing mainly on sort of working with clients through collaborative means, like mainly through like a very client-oriented servicing approach, using the construction management methodologies.
Yeah.
And which was also unique in those days because most of the work was procured using a fixed price model and had been for decades. So he was a bit of a disruptor in that time.
So one of the pioneers of construction management.
I think so, absolutely.
Interesting.
So I grew up in that kind of environment. As I reached my early teens, I would always talk to my father about construction, and he would tell me about some of the struggles he was going through, and so when he made it very clear to me that when I turned 16, I would be working on job sites.
Yeah.
And so that's precisely what happened. So when I turned 16, that first summer, I started working on construction sites as a laborer.
Whereabouts in Markham, or?
Just all around Toronto. I worked on many different sites, but I was a laborer, and I had jobs like carrying materials, doing maybe very basic sort of carpentry work, cleaning up. I spent a lot of time pushing a broom, cleaning up.
Yeah.
I spent one summer, pretty well the entire summer, just excavating by hand, like digging with a shovel for an entire summer.
Yikes.
Backbreaking work.
Absolutely. It was wide-ranging work, but I was pretty well paid for what I was doing, which was nice. And so when I went back to school during the school year, I had a little bit of spending money, which was nice.
Right.
But I always looked forward to going back. In those days, it was tough work. It was very tough. I think I really gained an appreciation for what people go through on construction sites, some of the challenges, and I also experienced a lot of camaraderie because there was a lot of Portuguese, Italians working on sites, and although I never learned the language, you learn kind of a site-based sign language.
Yeah.
Good and bad. So that was sort of the foundation. So I did that for many years, and then I studied engineering at Queen's University, and so I began to get into more of the office side of the business after I graduated, and I worked in our estimating department for many years.
Okay.
I worked in a few different offices because at that time the company had grown, and we had offices in various places. And then in 1999, I went to move to the UK because our company had acquired a very large contract with Honda Manufacturing to build a 1 million square foot manufacturing facility
Okay.
in Swindon, England.
Wow.
So I went out.
Whereabouts in Swindon? Is that sort of north of Manchester, south of Manchester, north of London?
Yep. So it's in the Cotswolds, which is a really beautiful area, rolling hills, a lot of country pubs, and it's about just over an hour west of London.
Interesting.
So I spent several years there. I delivered this project, which was fascinating, and it was really, I think, for me, the first exposure to kind of lean working methods.
Yeah.
Around that time, I think reports had come out in the UK just documenting some of the problems in industry.
Right.
And this project sort of bucked the trend because we were able to achieve a lot with the very lean staff.
Right. And so what would be kind of your day-to-day on a project like that? Like what are you doing in there?
Well, I was a junior project manager, and so I had a few responsibilities. I had responsibility to manage some of the ancillary buildings that we were building. I also had to oversee the construction schedule. So we had about probably a 7,000 activity construction schedule that I had to develop and kind of update and manage. I thought that was a large part of my responsibility doing that. We also had to coordinate the process works along the side of the base building. So it was a lot of coordination, a lot of meetings. We also learned sort of the Honda way of managing and organizing, which was fascinating. And so, in that experience, we were wearing the same uniform as our client. We worked in the client's office.
Right.
And so we had to adopt many of their lean working practices. So for example, every morning we had what they call a circle meeting, just a 5-minute meeting, and you brief everybody on what you're doing that day and what your key deliverables are for that day.
Wow. Okay.
It's every morning.
Keeps everyone accountable.
Absolutely. And there were a lot of, it was a tough project. We had a difficult client. It was very demanding. It was a tough project just with the trades that we had on the project.
Yeah.
The client really looked at us as an extension of their organization, and they wanted best value for their money.
Right.
And when you're going international, I would assume that obviously the sub-trades for sure would be different than over here in the GTA, and the trades would be different. So sort of how did that work when you went out there as a Toronto-based project manager going out to England for the first time? What was the process like in terms of figuring out the system, and how did you execute on that?
Yeah, it was quite a cultural shock. Just from the first few minutes that you arrive in the UK, you're driving on the left side of the road, right? and not only that, if you're renting a car, you got to figure out how to drive around a roundabout on the left side, right? So it's there were a few close calls, but there's a different working culture there, right? And I would say that the UK industry is more mature than our local industry.
Interesting.
And I think the way that plays out is that there's more of what I'd call like a blame claim culture over there, right?
Okay.
So when you're trying to manage sub-trades, they're very slippery and they're very sophisticated, and they know all sorts of ways of coming back and asking for extras.
Right.
And there's also generally, I think, a reluctance to really work in a highly collaborative way. And I think to a certain extent, our industry has some of these symptoms as well. But people always want to fall back on how they were trained with respect to management. What we were trying to do in that project was really push the limits on collaboration, to really collaborate on steroids and do something special. So,
how can we do a bunch of stuff correctly instead of being worried about getting blamed for something that goes wrong?
Absolutely. So our client was very experienced. They had a long and successful track record of delivering projects, but they had an awful experience the last time they did a major expansion. And that project resulted in claims and delays, extra costs, and a lot of deficient work that remained with Honda and was a big problem. So Honda was determined not to let that happen again.
Right.
So when they went through the selection process, right, for their construction manager, they had shortlisted 3 companies. They had shortlisted our company, the Canadian company.
Yep.
They had a Japanese company, and they had an English company. And so I'm not sure how true it is, but rumor had it that The Japanese manager wanted the Japanese company. The English manager wanted the English company. They couldn't agree, and so they chose the Canadian company. We actually worked pretty hard to win that contract, and we had a lot of good, I think, very unique aspects to our approach. But it was like more like a joint venture with this client, and there was an emphasis on generally lean management. There was an emphasis on proactive management, and just a high degree of collaboration. So we did lots of things. So to pull the subtrade team together, it actually started with a pre-qualification process, which included interviews, and many of the interviews were they had many of the questions in the interview had questions that were founded on culture, because this client wanted to bring together a team with a very consistent cultural fit.
Yeah.
And which I think is genius, because now, fast forward a little bit, my company is involved in doing a new type of construction, new type of contract called Integrated Project Delivery, IPD.
Okay.
And that kind of contracting, and I'd say any kind of successful venture, is going to involve working with people, and success is really dictated by how well you can work with other people.
Yeah.
Right? When you think back to maybe your best working experiences, it probably involves a successful collaboration with other people. So in 1999, this is what Honda was trying to do. They wanted to pull together a team that would turn into a high-performing team. And a large part of that is cultural fit.
So how do you go about interviewing somebody on culture? What does that process look like?
Because you must be doing that all the time now, as well as being interviewed on culture when you were getting.
Well, that's true, absolutely. And I think you want to ask questions that maybe are like sort of scenario-based questions. Like, if you were in this kind of scenario, how would you handle this or that?
Right. Okay.
Or what's your view on quality?
Right.
Right. How can you work with us in a partnership role? Or do you have examples of where you've done JVs or partnerships with clients before?
Yeah.
So these kind of questions. The client also spent a lot of time with us in our offices in Markham,
right,
and also on some of our job sites. So I think through that process, they wanted to sort of learn about us just through osmosis. Just, by observing our behavior, not just listening to us, but by observing it in practice.
Yeah, it's more of a practice as opposed to pitching, right? If everyone can pitch and say that they do something, but once you actually see it in action, it makes the world of a difference, right?
Oh, absolutely. But there were some really cool things about this project. Like, number one, the traditional approach in the UK is to enter into very onerous, like one-sided subcontracts, where general contractors or clients try to push as much risk downstream as possible.
Yeah.
I think Honda felt that if they entered into those kind of contracts, that it would preclude any kind of collaboration. So they felt that their contracts needed to be much more fair and balanced. So the contracts were very slim, and there was really an emphasis on proactive management. So on that project, we used a lot of forward-looking tools. Like scheduling was a very important component, management tool. Not just the overall project schedule, but using look-ahead schedules. So using a 3-week or a 4-week look-ahead schedule. That was mandatory on that project, and so that forced our company and our trades to plan the work.
Right.
Sounds simple, but if you're not forcing somebody into that kind of discipline, it often doesn't happen.
Yeah.
People just show up and they
look
can't,
up after 6 months.
They can't do.
Oh my God, we're behind schedule.
Exactly.
Right. So
proactive planning works, and we also had what we called an early warning system, so that if a trade contractor was ever delayed in their work, or if they forecasted a delay, then the parties were obligated to get together and work out a solution, in real time, rather than waiting for a delay to happen and then months later trying to deal with it. And Honda's philosophy was that if some kind of extra cost is being crystallized, then they want to have control over that money. They want to have control over how that money is being spent.
Right.
Where in the predominant behavior in the UK is that at the end of a project, your trades and your GC come at you as the client with a whole bunch of extras.
Yeah.
that you never agreed to.
Right.
And if you don't agree to it, then they litigate. So it's a very, very challenging way to do business, and Honda didn't want any part of that.
Right.
So it sounds like, from my understanding of project management, there's a few levers that you can sort of help. So if you have quality, if you're looking for a high quality project, and you're willing to spend the time, then you're going to have an increased cost. If you want to save a bit of cost and have a quicker project, then that quality might sometimes be sacrificed. So what sort of were the levers that they were focused on pushing, and which ones were they okay with letting slide a little bit more?
Yeah, well, they wanted all three. They wanted to have their cake.
They wanted to have everything,
just
okay.
like everybody else.
Yep.
But I guess, it's it's a process, and I think good construction involves strategy, but also a lot of tactics.
Yeah.
And I think the key was that in this case, the client was willing to not just talk the talk, but also to walk the walk. So in some cases, there were extra costs that were unavoidable, and they were very fair and reasonable in dealing with those things.
Right.
Like
To not sacrifice
quickly.
quality.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Can you
Yeah.
tell us about some of the bigger hurdles that, 1 million square feet is still big today. So back then, it's monstrous, right? So,
Absolutely.
So what sort of challenges did you go through? And
On that project, there were all sorts of things. There was the English weather, so there was a lot of rain.
Right.
And we had major earthworks to do. I think we had to raise the whole site by something like a meter.
okay,
And so there was a lot of fill that was brought onto the site.
right,
So there was the earthworks, there was the coordination of the concrete work with the steel work. There was another unique challenge also was coordinating the completion of the base building with the start of the process works. Because
Okay.
these process contractors, they specialize in things like conveyor systems, robotics, control systems. They're not used to working on construction sites.
right,
They're also not used to working according to, I would say, very stringent and fast-track schedules.
yeah,
Usually they work on sort of evenings and weekends, working around plant production. In this case, they were part of the main build. And
Right.
and in many cases, they were not from the UK. They were from other countries,
oh, okay,
such as Japan. And they had their own working methods and safety standards that they're used to working to, which are different than local standards.
right,
So a large part of it was just getting them to buy into our management framework. And the client actually was very complimentary to Canadian construction management.
yeah,
One of the reasons they selected us was because they really liked how we manage our sites. And I'm not talking solely about the Van Bots way, I'm just talking about generally how top tier Canadian GCs manage their sites. Like in the UK, it's not as efficient or schedule oriented.
Right.
I think the site managers take, in some cases, more of a back seat. And so this client didn't want the back seat. He wanted people to be driving the project, driving the schedule,
right.
Using these management tools at the face of the project.
So, obviously, you spent some time in the UK there. What was it like coming back? What happened after that?
Yeah, so I spent a few more years in Europe. I did an MBA in Holland.
Right.
I worked for Barclays Bank, and I worked in their facilities department, managing their projects throughout the UK and Europe, which was very interesting.
Yeah.
They were growing rapidly at that time. And then I decided to come back to Canada in 2005. I felt that after living as a local for a while, the novelty wears off. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of great things. I lived in London, the last part of my stay in the UK, and London's an incredible city. Very diverse, amazing place. But I felt that we've got something special in Toronto and Canada. We've got a quality of life that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Right.
And so that was the driving factor. I decided I had to make a decision. Am I going to spend my career in the UK or Canada? So I decided to come back. And at that point, I kind of rejoined Van Watts. But there were some interesting things happening. Within 3 years of me coming back, we ended up selling our company to CRELIBRARY, a large UK-based organization.
Right.
So CRELIBRARY had worked with Alice Dunn on some of the first P3 projects that were created by the predecessor to Infrastructure Ontario.
Okay.
Those projects had gone very well, and my understanding is that the McGuinty government was now moving to create Infrastructure Ontario and create this P3 program. So, however, Ellis Dunn felt they didn't need Carillion as a partner anymore. So Carillion had this experience of working in Canada, but they didn't have a vehicle by which to deliver P3.
Right.
So it made a lot of sense to do this deal. And so the stars had kind of aligned, I think, for my father and the shareholders, because around that 2007, 2008 time, the economy was pretty shaky. Like, nobody knew where it was going to go.
Yeah.
And it's not every day that you've got these large suitors knocking on your door asking to buy a large construction company.
Right.
Often it can be very difficult to sell construction companies. So
the sale was happening in the thick of the economic crisis?
Yes.
Okay.
So Carillion was unfazed because they looked at this committed program of P3s.
Yeah.
And they were confident that they were going to do well with that program. And so did the deal. And I ended up working as a vice president for Carillion. My job was to pursue and to win P3 bids.
Right.
And I thought it was fascinating. I was involved in many deals. I was involved in Bridgepoint Hospital, CAMH, the Forensic Services and Coroners Complex, the Quinte Courthouse, and also, what else? The Penetanguishene Mental Health Facility, and Humber River Regional Hospital.
If you don't mind, just pausing there and walking us through how the bid process works on infrastructure versus on real estate.
Sure. Yeah, so P3s stand for Public-Private Partnership. It's a model that was created by Infrastructure Ontario with a lot of input from other agencies, including UK agencies.
Yeah.
And the idea behind P3 is that you place the risk with the parties that are best placed to manage that risk. So in this case, the private sector. There's been many examples where the public sector has not done a very good job in managing that risk. So under P3, you're pushing a lot of risk onto the private sector. So under the IO program, they often refer to these projects as DBFMs or DBFs, or other variations where DBFM is design, build, finance, maintain. So as a proponent, you're entering into a contract with a project sponsor to design their facility, to build it, right, to finance design and construction, also to maintain it for 30 years, and then to also finance that maintenance. So you're basically entering into a fixed price contract to design, build, finance, and maintain this asset over the construction period and the 30-year concession period.
And the range in asset type could be anything from subway lines to hydro, anything like that, right? What else? What are some other things that you'll see in infrastructure P3s?
Well, right now there's a great emphasis on transit. That wasn't the case when I was working in P3. It was more social infrastructure.
Okay.
So courthouses, data centers, hospitals, and a few other things. But that was the bulk of the program at that point. The program has matured a little bit, just as it has in the UK. But it was a fascinating experience. Like I learned so much working with these people at Carillion. Some great people, very talented, very skilled people.
Yeah.
Learning from their facilities management team, which were top of their game. Learning from their finance people, learning from other divisions of Carillion. It was a fun time, and so and we were successful. We won several P3 bids.
So it's a sort of a bid and tender process for the infrastructure side. So how about on the real estate side? Then how does that bidding process work in terms of attracting high quality developers and making sure that the project is scalable and fits within your group's core competency?
Sure. Well, my approach now is different than what we did at Carillion. So, I learned a lot in P3, but when I left Carillion and started my own business, I took some very key, I would say, lessons learned from that P3 process to my own business, which I'm happy to talk about. But the P3 process is really there's only a handful of players that can do it well, and those are the players who have won most of the work here in Ontario. But to be honest, I'm quite happy to get out of P3. It's a very, very difficult, very demanding delivery method.
Yeah.
And so it's a real grind. It is a serious, serious grind. So I don't miss it. I learned a lot from it, but I don't miss it.
Can you tell us about the moment when, so the business is sold and when you're figuring things out, and then how you decided to start the Gillam Group?
Sure. So, so after being in the P3 game for about 3 years, the learning curve began to plateau a little bit. And, I saw CRELIBRARY making strides in P3, but at the expense of other sectors and other types of construction. And I also didn't like the idea of just working on transactions.
Right.
Like to me,
Yeah.
it was not meaningful. Right. I just didn't get a kick out of transactions.
Yeah.
Hands-on, problem-solving, dealing with the trades.
Well, that's it. Right. It's not
And relationships. And
exactly.
what I do, it's relationship-based. What Dama does, it's all about long-term relationships. And there's a lot of transactions along the way, but it's maintaining those relationships and fostering them that leads to a transaction. But our approach, both of ours, has always been more on the relationship side, and I'm sure it's the same for you.
Absolutely. And so, I thought back, romantically to the earlier VanBots days, right?
Yeah.
And we made our company. We grew this company on the basis of relationships, and we had, many repeat clients that would come to us continually. Many of these repeat clients were blue chip clients, and so I just love the idea of doing good work. And getting a handshake and a pat on the back for doing a good job,
Right.
and enjoying the process, and so that was the genesis to Gillam Group. I thought that kind of approach, that service doesn't really exist, as far as I knew, in that mid space.
Right. Does talking a little bit about family, what does that conversation go with? How does the conversation go with your partner, or did you have kids at the time? Say, hey, I want to start this new company and this new journey. What do you think? How does that happen?
Well, it's funny because I think I've always had some kind of entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
And even while working at CRELIBRARY, I would have these sort of business ideas, and I would bounce them off my wife, saying, "What do you think about this and about that?"
Yeah.
And she was always lukewarm with the ideas. But when I came home one evening and said, "I'm thinking about starting my own construction company," she said, "That's the best idea I've ever heard you come up with."
Yeah.
Of all your ideas, all your crazy ideas,
Wow.
that's the best one. And so, I looked at it from
Lucky
a risk
man.
perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she was on board from the beginning.
Well, I mean, it's what you know, right? It's what you've done before. You've been proven success, and I mean, why not? If you know something very well, why not try doing it on your own? And on your own is never on your own, right? I mean, I know whenever I'm doing anything, it's always with partners, right? And I'm imagining it's the same with you. You have to be on the Profit 500 as the fastest growing company. I'm imagining there's a lot of partners that you've formed along the way, and employees and sub trades, everything like that. It's once again, it goes back to the relationships, right? So can you speak to that a bit?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think my success is very, very closely related to that approach of relationships. I wouldn't be in business today if I didn't have the relationships that I have with the local market. And I'm talking about people, employees, people that work for me. I'm talking about trade contractors that support us.
Yeah.
As a construction management company or GC, 90% of the work is done by trades and suppliers. And so if you don't have their support, you can't be in business. But also clients and consultants, architects, engineers, it's all part of this network of relationships. And, and that's the real key to success. You're essentially balancing relationships. And so it's of vital importance to the success of any business. And it's been a real focus of our company since the very beginning.
Can you tell us a little bit about the first project and how you went about getting it and how that kind of transpired?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that the first project that we won was, I would say, probably our flagship project.
Yeah.
This was the Branksome Hall Athletic and Wellness Facility on Mount Pleasant Road. And so we were invited to participate in a competitive process. So we put in a proposal, and ultimately we won the project. and we were appointed as the client's construction manager.
Okay.
And
So this is your first project, but you already have a team behind you. How many people, when you say we, how many people are we talking about?
right, so when this opportunity arose, excuse me, I had to resign from CRELIBRARY to pursue the opportunity.
Right.
And I felt that it was worth doing that, right? So I resigned, and then I got working on the proposal. So
Yeah.
we had to submit details of our team, for example. So I had to go find a team,
Right.
right, before I even had a first project. And so I was able to do that. I was able to go out and find not just an average team, but an extraordinary team
Yeah.
for this project that had a lot of experience in delivering those kind of projects successfully, but also a team that I had a close working relationship with over years, and that I knew was the right cultural fit. So that team was invited to the interview,
Yeah.
and so and that it was vital. It was vital to winning that project. So we just put together a cracking team,
Yeah.
and I was closely involved in the project. But the challenge is that we had about a year right before construction was going to start.
Okay.
And you can't be a construction company or a very good construction company if you're not building anything.
Right.
And so even though we had this amazing project in the pipeline, we still had to find other opportunities
Right.
to get going.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think the very first contract I got was a $40,000 contract to build a high security vestibule for a data center company.
Interesting.
And I remember we put in a bid. Our price was half the price of the other contract. And so the client invited us in, and he told us that we were pretty low.
Yeah.
And he said, "Are you comfortable?" And we reviewed our quantities and our rates, and everything was fine. He said, "Oh, by the way, can you get a performance bond?" And I sort of laughed, and I thought, in my whole career, I don't think I've ever had to get a bond for something so small.
Yeah.
Right.
So I went to the bonding company, and I had a bonding facility.
Yeah.
And the bonding company said, "Well,
Can you just explain a little bit about what the bond is, just for people who might not know?
So a bond is essentially an insurance product that insures a client against any kind of losses relating to a contractor's failure to perform.
Yeah.
And it's got a limit to it, which is usually 50% of the contract price.
Right. Okay.
So this client
For
was thinking to
40,000
himself,
square feet.
I'm not sure these guys are up to it, but they took a chance on us.
Yeah.
And it was a great job. So my estimator ended up being the project manager and the superintendent. I had a few hats. I was the IT guy. I also was a laborer on the job site,
Wow.
a carpenter. We had to build hoarding, evenings and weekends, move it around. But we did a good job on the project. We made money, and after that, the client came back to us for another 4 projects after that.
Wow.
And they realized they were getting hosed by their other supplier
Yeah.
who they had been relying on for a long time. So we developed a new relationship out of that we still maintain to this day.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting experience. But anyways, that's how it went. And so the consultant involved in that project liked our work, and they referred us to some other people. And around this time, we were knocking on doors and just reconnecting with many of our former clients.
Yeah.
And some of them took an approach like, okay, we're going to wait and see how you guys do.
Right.
And
a
there
little
were a
risky
few-
right now.
Right. There were a few who put up their hand and said, yeah, I want to work with you.
Right.
And I think for them, it was, for that group, it was a great opportunity because we were, very hungry, and we had very aggressive fees, right? And we put a lot of time and effort. We still do.
Yeah.
But anyways, it was a good process, and basically started to grow the company. And as the company grew, I hired people that I knew, that I trusted, people that I had worked with before,
Right.
people that I had a long-term working history with. And in those early days, we had a lot of discussions around the culture of the company. I remember when we were only maybe 8 people and having meetings as a company dedicated solely to culture. We talked about, what sort of things do we want to have in our culture? What sort of things do we not want to have? And what sort of things have people been exposed to at other businesses that we would like to bring into this company?
Yeah.
And so those are really key discussions to I guess informing our values and our approach.
Yeah, I think that's really rare in a new organization to be thinking that proactively. Usually it's just get a bunch of people in a room. Okay, go. What can we do to get business, right? So that's, obviously it's had a huge impact on the way that you've been able to grow, so.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of that too, right? But, we made time for the cultural piece.
Right.
Yeah. So what are some of those things that dive a bit deeper in that you saw other people, or whether it be competitors or firms outside of that industry doing that you wanted to sort of implement into your business, and some of the things you wanted to make sure you avoided, especially being a GC?
Yeah, well, for us, this has been a journey. We've had the, I would say, advantage of starting with a blank canvas, having had a successful business before. And it makes it maybe a little bit easier, right? Or maybe you're starting off a little better informed than otherwise. But it's still an enormous challenge for building any business, right? And nothing comes easy at all. And so, I think I think I was very fortunate in that I got some really, really good people. As the company grew, we brought great people in, and there was always a focus on hiring good people. And there was always a focus on cultural fit, and that's never changed. And so, and I think that focus has been just crucial, right?
Yeah.
to building the kind of organization that I'm happy to have.
Yeah.
But there's been bumps. There's been a lot of bumps in the way. We've had to develop processes along the way, systems, and if I was to turn the clock back, I would probably want to spend more time in investing in those processes and systems than maybe we did at certain times.
Right.
So maybe that was a lesson learned, but it's been a very exciting process.
Yeah.
And I think you can't go wrong by surrounding yourself with people who are better and smarter than you are. It's a timeless, a success factor. But I think, I go back to the cultural piece because it's so important. If to create a high-performing team, people have to be able to work together, and it's like your values and your culture is like the glue that holds everything together.
Yeah.
And like Peter Drucker, who's a very famous strategy guru, said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And I believe that in and out because it's fundamental. There was a Google study that was done where I think Google was trying to figure out why certain teams were high-performing teams and why other teams were not.
Yeah.
And it was a very extensive study, and you can find the results online. But Google looked at many, many different factors, things like the leader of those groups, how they work together. And it's interesting what came out of it was actually not one particular thing like a leader or a framework. It was more like that the high-performing groups were simply the groups that were able to work together the best.
So that goes back to that collaborative approach that you guys had in the UK, and sort of that same experience over
Absolutely.
here, right? Instead of trying to have silos, actually getting
Right.
everyone involved. It makes, I know from my own experience, right, when I've worked on teams in the past, or when you've led teams in the past, if everyone buys in, you always end up with greater results than if just a few people buy in and some people are, I don't know if I want to do this. Right?
Well, that's it. And so, like with any team or any project or any job, there's always going to be ups and downs, right? And I think your culture, it really comes out when you're going through the downs, right? How do you deal with adversity?
So can you give us a specific example then as to some of the times where either in your business or on a specific project there was some unexpected hurdle that came about, and how you and your team sort of dealt with that hurdle?
Sure. So, I've developed a few philosophies, right, while being in business.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because your perspective is a little different when you're an owner of a company, and everything lands at your feet, good and bad, right? You as the owner, you wear everything.
Total
Right.
accountability.
It is totally, and
Right.
there's no place to go. So, so let's see. I think that our greatest asset in this industry is time. I think our job, right, to succeed, to do well in this industry, you have to be good at managing risk. And so what that means is you have to be able to identify risks early and act on them early. Because when you can act on things early, then you have maximum time to find efficient solutions.
Yeah.
Right? If you're landed with problems, when you're into construction or when you're up against a deadline,
You're in reaction mode.
you are like
Yeah.
your only solution at that stage is really to use expensive solutions,
Right.
and that's not in anyone's interest. So a large part of what we do revolves around identifying and managing risks early.
So still carrying on some of that Honda philosophy of everybody meeting in the morning, planning out 4 weeks in advance, that type of thing.
Absolutely. And the other part of it is that we're going to make mistakes as we go. There's always going to be mistakes, but the key is to learn from those mistakes, right? And if you have a culture of blaming people,
Yeah.
no one's going to come forward with mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And you're never even going to find out about certain mistakes, and you're never
Right.
going to learn from them,
Right.
and you're never going to have the hearts and minds of your staff.
Right. So more letting your staff know it's not going to be a big deal as long as you tell me about it and there's communication
Right.
and we
Yeah.
work to resolve it.
Right. So if someone makes a mistake, that's okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. But if you make a mistake and don't tell me about it until the 11th hour, then I'll have a
Yeah.
serious problem with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then you own that mistake. If someone's experiencing an issue, bring it forward. Like it's okay to ask for help. It's okay. Like I'd rather have someone ask for help than not ask for help, because if someone needs help, and doesn't ask for it, they're essentially watching themselves fail.
Yeah.
And I'm not in the business. Like we're not in the business of watching ourselves fail.
Yeah.
So we put in place a reporting structure and processes that flag problems early, so we can deal with them early, regardless of whose fault it is, where
Yeah.
it came from. The key is to know about it early, so you can have control over it early,
Right. Can you?
and then learn from it.
Right. Right. Can you tell us about a time, maybe in the earlier days, and maybe you had 16 backup plans, but even the 16th one failed? Like, was there a time when there was a huge challenge, and can you tell us a little bit about something like that?
Well, there's in this industry, you're always throwing curveballs.
Yeah.
Right? You can plan and plan and plan.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, your plan is always going to change.
Right.
You still have to plan. You still have to do it. There's no excuse for not planning. You have to plan.
Yeah.
But you know that your plan is going to change.
Yeah.
So you've got to build in some contingencies, and you've got to continually tweak the plan,
Right.
right? So that you can adapt to the changing environment, right? We did a project for the Delta Chelsea Hotel, which is now called the Eaton Chelsea Hotel.
Okay.
This was a really interesting project. It was an exterior refurbishment.
Whereabouts?
Of the
Whereabouts
North
is this,
Tower, so
Marcus?
Yonge and Gerrard.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So the project involved a total exterior refurbishment, roofing, balconies. We had to replace 4 kilometers of balcony handrails. We had to refurbish 4 kilometers of lineal balcony as part of this contract, because there's 26 stories in that building. So this was a project that was all in the exterior, so it was very weather sensitive. So partway through the project, we were hit by the ice storm.
Oh.
Right?
What year was this?
This was, I think it was 2013.
Okay.
So we were hit by the ice storm, right?
Yikes.
And so it had a huge impact on the project for several reasons. Like one reason is that the hotel became fully booked. Right?
Right.
Because during construction, we were leaving out, we were approaching it on a floor by floor basis.
Yep.
So the floor we were working on was left unoccupied because there was a little bit of noise. So the client filled up the entire hotel. So first, secondly was obviously the weather effects, because we had ice, accumulating on the building.
Yeah.
And then also the labor challenges, the productivity issues. So we ended up changing our approach. We're using mass climbers. We began to fall behind schedule, but we developed some alternate means and methods of accessing the works.
Yeah.
We started using several crews, like suspended off of swing stages.
Wow.
Wow.
And so we were actually able to complete the project on schedule, even though our original approach was significantly disrupted.
Yeah.
And I think there was a very minor cost impact from it. It was hardly even significant. So, but again, we had a client who was understanding, who
Wow.
actively worked with us to try to find solutions.
Yeah, even when you could have easily given the excuse. I mean, what do they call it? The force majeure, an act of God, or you can't control that. So you could have easily. It's impressive that you pulled it off.
Absolutely, but in recent years, my company has started to get into a new type of contract delivery, which is called integrated project delivery, or IPD, which I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And IPD, interestingly, begins to formalize many of these lean, sort of collaborative practices that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Where before these things were talked about, but they weren't really hardwired into any kind of agreement.
Right.
And I'm very excited with IPD. I think it's potentially transformational for our industry in a very positive way. Our industry really needs help and it needs help from owners. It needs help from consultants. It needs help from trade contractors. Everybody who interfaces with this industry,
Right.
I think, needs to really participate in raising the standards and the level of awareness.
Okay. What would be a main difference, like on a day-to-day basis, between a company using IPD and the other company?
Yeah. So with traditional contracts, the GC or the construction manager entered into subcontracts.
Mm-hmm.
Each of those subcontractors is really only interested in its own profit center.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the GC, right, has got to deliver the project by a certain, like they're committed to a certain schedule,
Yeah.
and they've got to deliver a certain scope for a price. The trades don't really care. They don't really care about the overall schedule. They just
Right.
care about making their profit.
Right.
And so it's interesting because in business, one of the things you learn in business school, like in strategy, which is not that complicated, but if the essence of strategy is articulating a vision, right, and creating objectives, and then cascading those objectives through every part of your company,
Right.
so that everybody is aligned, every department's aligned on achieving the overarching objectives.
Right.
That doesn't happen in construction.
So how do you foster that sort of buy-in approach by the trades to make sure that their vision is aligned and that they do buy in with your vision?
So the interesting thing about IPD, integrated project delivery, is that it creates that alignment. So under an IPD form of contract, the general contractor, or called the construction manager, and the key trades are all party to a single agreement, right? And furthermore, the consulting team, like the designers, are also part of that. They're also party to that single agreement.
So what does that mean? They do better if you do better? Something like that?
So that whole team is incentivized to deliver the client's objectives, and they're incentivized financially. So once you sign that contract, that entire team puts their profit into a pool,
Yeah.
and they put their profit at risk. So that the only way that team can earn its profit is if the whole team delivers the project on time and on budget.
Wow.
Wow.
And so if they deliver over budget, the overage eats into the team's profit, so that less profit is distributed at the end of the project. Right? But what that creates, though, is a kind of behavior that you just don't see on projects normally, because you see teamwork, you see trades working with each other, working with consultants to solve problems.
Yeah.
When often in traditional construction, when problems arise, there's often
It's
pointing
that
of
blame
fingers.
game that
Yes.
you're talking about.
It's
yeah.
his fault. It's his fault.
Yeah.
And clients are often stuck in the middle, not knowing who to believe and how to handle it. And it's actually it's very much a problem that's crystallized by the current setup of contracts. And the solution is IPD. It's a very effective solution. So that's one of the things. But also there's a whole bunch of other lean philosophies and management tools and processes and practices that come into IPD.
Yeah.
There's a huge emphasis on planning, but planning in a way that's collaborative. Like, rather than me sort of dictate a schedule, right? We bring everyone together, and as a team, we work out how we're going to deliver the schedule, and then we keep people accountable for their commitments.
I imagine you could deliver jobs much faster if everybody's working together. I'm trying to.
Absolutely. there's enormous productivity gains, enormous gains. And that's why when you deliver a project on schedule, usually everybody makes money.
Right.
Because you've successfully delivered it. So there's a huge emphasis on planning, on management, on some of these sort of working practices like Honda employees. Those are used in IPD. There's also a heavy emphasis on technology. So we use BIM, like Building Information Modeling, to design the work, to coordinate it, and to use it for construction planning as well. Because if you're not using BIM, it's like walking through a forest at night without a flashlight.
So what is BIM?
You're going to bump into things.
What is BIM?
So BIM is an acronym. It stands for Building Information Modeling. Okay. So there are new software systems that allow you to build or to design your facility, virtually. You can design it within an integrated model. So within this virtual model, you're designing in 3 dimensions, and you're also incorporating all design disciplines into one integrated model. So before BIM, people were using CAD.
Yep.
Right. CAD files, like 2 dimensions. Drawings, so an architect would design in 2 dimensions, and then their mechanical consultant, electrical, structural consultants would also design in 2 dimensions. The problem is that they're all using, in some cases, they're different drawings, right? And so when those drawings come together, you find that frequently, based on this 2D model, there's coordination issues. Things don't work like they're supposed to.
Yeah.
When you design in one integrated model, one virtual model, and you're designing in 3D, I think coordination issues are much more apparent, and you find those issues much earlier than you would using traditional 2D instruments. So going back to my comment on risk management, it means that you can find problems early, you can deal with them early. You're just making little changes on paper rather than trying to make changes in the field when it's very, very costly and time consuming.
And are other GCs a lot slower to adopt this technology, or like is this one of the reasons that you guys have been growing so quickly, or?
Well, I would say for us, we have a BIM department.
Yeah.
And so we have a BIM capability, and I'm very excited with this because it means we can do our job way better than we could before. Yeah. We're better equipped to do it. And so, William Gibson said the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what you find in this industry is that there's a huge range of abilities. Like the top tier GCs are very sophisticated, right, with their use of BIM, and then some of maybe the smaller GCs, never even heard of it.
Right.
And so there's a very wide degree of variation, but I think BIM offers value. I think I would say in almost every scenario in terms of design and construction. And so really, like, BIM needs to be leveraged by everybody in this space.
Aside from BIM, what are the other new technologies that you're seeing in the GC space or that have been effective in the past to sort of shape now and the future for the construction and GC industry?
Right. Well, I'd say we've seen huge benefit from prefabrication and panelization. And this could be things like structural building components, building envelope components, even like mechanical systems. One of our projects, we built the engineering building for York University. It's called the Bergeron Center. Yeah. This was a fast track project. We built it in essentially 23 months, and this project was just under $100 million. It was built at lightning speed, and one of the ways we were able to do that is because we prefabbed a lot of the mechanical systems and some of the other like the building envelope systems. So, but a lot of our mechanical distribution was prefab. So we had piping on racks. We had a mechanical plant that was built on sort of pallets and steel frames, and this stuff was designed and built off-site, and it was brought on site, hoisted into position, connected, and that was it. Right. And so that kind of technology is extremely beneficial. But I see now industry leveraging that. I see more opportunities for those efficiencies. Interestingly, we're following the European evolution as well. This is how it worked in Europe. I think they're ahead of us in terms of prefab and panelizing. But I'm happy to see the industry moving in this direction. I think there's huge gains to be made just in how we organize ourselves.
Yeah.
Just some of the things I was talking about IPD, there's huge gains to be made just in how we can work together using lean philosophies. And so I think the industry generally is just really in its infancy around that.
Interesting. One other question that I hear all the time from developers is, and people that own properties is, well, condo prices have increased over the past 10 years, almost year over year, right? So given that increase in condo prices, there's oftentimes what we've seen in the past is an increase in costs as well that are unrelated to that increase in condo prices. So what has that trend in the past, why has those costs increased in the past in terms of hard costs, soft costs? Where do you see those going in the future, and how do you mitigate against the rising costs?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I deal with a lot of clients, a lot of private developers, public sector clients, and everyone struggles with these increases in cost. I think there's a few things that are going on. Like, one is that labor costs always go up.
Yeah.
There's the very large GCs have union agreements, and within the union agreements there are increases in cost that are built in, and so that drives a large part of the marketplace. So every year there's an increase that's somewhat in line with inflation, but it's renegotiated every 3 or 4 years. So there's increasing labor cost all the time. On top of that, there's fluctuations just with commodity prices, in foreign exchange rates.
Yeah.
And so that's always going to cause. Recently, there's been the tariffs down in the U.S. So from our perspective, the cost of structural steel has just the supply cost has gone up by about 40% in the last year. But we've also seen very substantial increases with glass, drywall, masonry.
Wow.
In some of these cases, there are some supply and demand effects, but where say for example masons are very busy right now. It's hard to get masons just to look at pricing projects, and so some of the cost increase probably is related to just supply and demand.
Right.
Maybe certain trades just being very busy and increasing their rates because they can. But I don't think that's typical across the board though, because I also hear from many trades who say that they're not very busy right now, and they're looking for work. So you hear different things from different people in different marketplaces.
Yeah.
So it's still very much a marketplace that's somewhat fragmented. There's a lot of variation between local regions, and it's a dynamic marketplace. Things are always changing. So in terms of where it's going to go, I see a growing shortage, right, of residential units. I think that's going to play out in terms of increased competition.
Yeah.
It may result in increases in costs or the price point. It's hard to say, because I think a lot of buyers are already at their limit of affordability.
Yeah.
So it's hard to predict where it's going to go, but I think certainly there's going to be more demand than supply for housing in the Toronto area.
Right.
I think we're going to see further expansion of the markets outside of Toronto. I think Kitchener, Waterloo, Hamilton, Barrie, I think those markets will accelerate.
Yeah.
But overall, I don't think supply will keep up with demand. How things will play out going forward, I think construction costs will continue to go up. I hope they don't go up quickly, because that may kill projects.
Right.
And if projects die, that's no good for anybody in the development, design, or construction industry.
Yeah.
I mean,
let alone the people who need the housing.
Absolutely. So I can see an increase in cost, but I really hope it's not as rapid as we've seen in recent years.
You want to do the 3 truths, and then
You go ahead.
I like that one.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this question is called the 3 truths. We're gonna wrap things up. this question is called the 3 truths. So imagine years from now, you are on your deathbed and you're
Several years from now. Several years from now.
Okay, let me start again. Imagine years from now, many years from now, you're on your deathbed and your whole family's around you and you had a wonderful life, lived to be 150, kids, grandkids, everybody's there. But for some reason, everything that you've written down, recorded, including this interview, it's not there anymore. And everybody loves you and they come and say, Marcus, you have just a minute left. Can you write us down 3 notes of how you think about life, how you think about construction, how you think about everything to pass along? What do you think?
You know what? That's interesting. I don't know. I would say seize the moment.
Yeah.
Like don't wait.
Yeah.
Never wait. Just seize the moment. That's one. Before I started my company, I actually thought I was taking a big risk.
Right.
Right. But in retrospect, I think it would have been much riskier to keep doing what I was doing.
Right.
Right. So I would say, take the risk.
Yeah.
Right. Have confidence in yourself. Take that risk. And then I would also say, take some time to enjoy the trip, enjoy the process along the way.
Yeah.
Right. And so because that's another.
It's not enough of that
factor as well. Just with starting the new business, I thought, I want to have fun. I want to enjoy this.
Yeah.
Life's too short. Right. And so I do try to take moments to enjoy the ride.
Right.
I think I could probably do a better job, but yeah, I would encourage everybody just enjoy the ride.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
You got one more?
That was 3 then.
Was that okay?
Yeah, that was 3.
Yeah,
That was 3.
yeah. That's really good. So, okay. Well, I think thank you so much for being here. I know that the audience has certainly taken a lot from this, and I would encourage anybody in the industry who is hoping to learn more about construction or perhaps has a project for Marcus to definitely reach out. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I would just say we need great people in this industry. We need people to step up and be the change that we need in this industry. So I would encourage people just to participate, do their part, and I'm always happy just to have a chat. So my door is always open.
Appreciate that.
Thanks very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, Mark.